Walters is back for another season as the official bar of the Nats Chat podcast. Walters is the best spot to go before and after home games, located at the southeast corner of Capitol and N Streets, right across the street from the ballpark.
Here's the set. Hicks delivers, and Abrams swings and drives into the air to left center field. Moving over is the left fielder. Duran has a play, and a couple of steps shy of the warning track in front of the Red Sox bullpen. He makes the catch, and this one is over. The Red Sox come to the nation's capital and wind up with a sweep of this three-game series.
I do want to give the Nats credit, though. I thought they did a pretty good job against Garrett Crochet. The Red Sox...
Whoa. Jeff Passan just tweeted that they've fired Rizzo and Martinez.
And welcome to Nats Chat, along with MASNsports.com Nationals insider Mark Zuckerman. I'm Al Galdi, host of the Al Galdi podcast. Sunday, July 6, 2025 goes down as an historic day in Nationals history. Nats managing principal owner Mark Lerner, he on Sunday night announced having fired Nats president of baseball operations and general manager Mike Rizzo and manager Davey Martinez. Rizzo gone, Davey gone. Change that we thought might happen, but not until after the end of this Nats season. Instead, ends up happening before the All-Star break. Truly the end of an era. Said Lerner in a statement, quote, "On behalf of our family and the Washington Nationals organization, I first and foremost want to thank Mike and Davey for their contributions to our franchise and our city. Our family is eternally grateful for their years of dedication to the organization, including their roles in bringing a World Series trophy to Washington, D.C. While we are appreciative of their past successes, the on-field performance has not been where we or our fans expect it to be. This is a pivotal time for our club, and we believe a fresh approach and new energy is the best course of action for our team moving forward," end quote. Mark Lerner named Senior Vice President and Assistant General Manager of Baseball Operations Mike DeBartolo as Interim General Manager and said that an interim manager will be announced, quote, "sometime on Monday," end quote. But, we use that phrase, end of an era. The Nats hired Mike Rizzo in July 2006, promoted him to interim general manager in March 2009, removed the interim tag from his GM title in August 2009. The Nats hired Davey Martinez as their manager in October 2017. The Nats had been one of the most stable organizations in MLB. That stability now gone, and this announcement of the firings came shortly after another Nats loss, a 6-4 loss to the Boston Red Sox at Nationals Park on Sunday afternoon, completing a 3-game sweep and dropping the Nats to a new low point in this MLB regular season, 16 games below 500, 37-53. That is the second worst record in the National League. And oh, by the way, we on Sunday evening learned of the full National League and American League rosters for the 2025 MLB All-Star Game. The Nats have 2 All-Stars, left fielder James Wood and starting pitcher Mackenzie Gore. But Mark, I feel like the news of the Nats having 2 All-Stars has been buried a bit by the other Nats news of Sunday evening.
Oh, yeah, Al, this is a day we're long going to remember for everything that happened and the timing of it all and the way that it all went down. Can we go behind the curtain here a little and let people know that we were already more than halfway through recording what we thought was an episode for the podcast that was going to be focused on the game and the All-Star selections, with some discussion we were starting to have in there about the overall state of things in the wake of the sweep and what it might mean for everyone. And then the news broke and we hit the pause button and decided we really need to start this one over because obviously the news that came out last of everything is the most significant news that this team has made in a long time. There's a lot we're going to get to here. I'm just going to say this. The timing of it, I think, is really fascinating. This is 1 week exactly before the draft, in which the Nationals hold the number 1 pick in the draft. You know that Mike Rizzo was geared up for that, the old scout himself with a chance to pick number 1 yet again. By the way, you mentioned when his interim tag was taken off back in 2009, he became the permanent GM. That occurred right after they signed Steven Strasburg after drafting him. And it was a big question, would they get him to sign or would he take a pass and wouldn't accept whatever the offer was? Back then, there was a lot more flexibility. That's the week that he was hired full time to be the GM. And here we are a week before they have a chance to draft number one again. And as far as we know, he's not a part of that process unless they already made the decision prior to this date. So that part of it, I think, is fascinating. And I don't know if poetic's the right word for it, but man, that occurred to me, the bizarre timing of that. And oh, by the way, there's also going to be a new manager that we'll find out on Monday. And what it means is that really the rest of the season is an interim season for everybody. And then they figure out what they're going to do at the end of all that.
It's so funny. This ownership group has been lambasted for doing nothing, seemingly being disinterested, and then out of nowhere, like, a ton of bricks falling out of the sky onto your head. You get this announcement on Sunday evening. Nobody anticipated this. I mean, if anything was going to happen in season, you thought maybe Davey Martinez would be fired, but I don't know of a single person who thought that Mike Rizzo would be fired in season. Now, after the season, yes, maybe. In season, no. And instead, it ends up happening. Both guys get ousted like this. We want to hear from you. Let us know what you think. You can find us on X at Nats_chat. You can hit us up on Blue Sky at Nats Chat Podcast. You can email us natschatpodcast@gmail.com. We have a website you could check out too, natschatpodcast.com, at which you can purchase a Nats Chat Podcast t-shirt. If you are new to the podcast, we do a new episode of this podcast for the morning after every Nationals regular season game day. We are with you weekend, weekday, does not matter. We talk Nationals like no other podcast or show does, and we're very proud of what we do, and we appreciate all of you for tuning in. So I think the timing is a good place to start. Why now? What do you think the Lerner ownership group was thinking in making these moves now?
I think what's important to consider here, and I don't know this for a fact, but just understanding usually how these things tend to go. I don't think this is a spur of the moment, oh, they just got swept by the Red Sox, we better do something, we're going to fire everybody kind of situation. You don't make those kind of moves without having had some serious internal discussions, probably over the course of several days, if not even longer than that. The way that they lost the first two games of the series, blowouts in which there were pretty lifeless performances and a lot of the team's weaknesses were on display. Bad defense, bad pitching, bad bullpen, even some bad base running thrown in there as well. I think that could prompt some of it. I'm sure, as you would probably agree, when they had the 11-game losing streak last month, all of a sudden everyone's ears are perked up. Okay, what do we need to do here? Do we need to start considering making some changes? And they didn't at the time. We thought maybe that was a sign that they're going to, wait this out now and go to the end of the season. We also know, we've discussed, that both Rizzo and Martinez had options for next season to be picked up at some point in July. I don't know the specific date of that. I kind of thought all along maybe somewhere around the All-Star break would make sense for that, but I don't know the exact specifics of that. So perhaps they got to a point that said, we're not picking up the options. Are we going to now go through the rest of the season with these two essentially as lame ducks and say, well, we're still going to evaluate you and then we'll decide at the end of the year what to do? Or has the performance as we've seen it here been so striking, and we know ultimately that changes are needed, that we just need to go ahead and do it right now? I'm guessing they got to that point based on what they had seen throughout the month of June, but also during this homestand, and particularly the first two games of the series. Now, I think the decision probably was already made prior to this, but if you needed a final nail in the coffin, maybe more so on Mike Rizzo than on Davey Martinez. If you were at the ballpark on Sunday, if you remember ownership and you were there, and I know obviously they were there, and in the top of the first inning, a guy named Shinosuke Ogasawara takes the mound to make his major league debut for you. This is the first Japanese player the Nationals had ever signed directly out of Asia as a free agent. He was given a 2-year, $3.5 million deal. What we saw of him in spring training was very unimpressive. He didn't exactly do a lot in the minor leagues. That said, he's screaming to be called up, dealt with an injury as well. Comes in to make his major league debut, and 5 batters in, they're trailing 4-0. Again, I think the decision was already made, but if you needed one last final the stars are aligning here and telling us that whatever we're doing right now is not working. And that's not just on the manager, but it goes higher up than that. Maybe that kind of sealed the deal. They said, okay, it's time to do it. The other factor real quick would be, this is the end of a homestand. They're off on Monday. They start a road trip Tuesday in St. Louis. You make that kind of move usually in a case like that. You don't wait till they're already on the road. You make the move at the end of the homestand. The team leaves town. The manager and GM stay behind.
There's so much to take in with everything. I think one of the more sobering things, though, is this. Season number 5 of a rebuild that, as I've been saying, is not working. And I think now you can go even stronger than that. This is a rebuild that is failing. When you mid-rebuild fire the person in charge of the rebuild, boy, is that a big blow to the psyche of the fan base, to the psyche of the franchise. Does that mean you now reset the rebuild? Does that mean that the rebuild now starts all over? Maybe not entirely so, but that is as far from ideal as you can be, that in the middle of a rebuild, and really in a lot of ways well into a rebuild, season number 5 of a rebuild, you get rid of the architect of the rebuild. You know, for a while we were told the rebuild's going well. And then remember what happened in the 2023-2024 offseason. In a very peculiar thing, the Nats mid-rebuild revamped the front office beneath Mike Rizzo. And I remember saying to you at the time, if you think that little of the front office beneath Rizzo, why are you retaining the man in charge of those people? Why are you retaining Rizzo? And the Nats did. And the nightmare scenario in that moment was, you're eventually going to fire Rizzo anyway, and you're going to blow the whole thing up anyway. And here we are now 2 years later, and that's exactly what is happening. This is the last thing you should ever be doing in the middle of a rebuild or well into a rebuild. Firing your general manager, firing your head of baseball operations. And yet that's exactly what's happening here. This rebuild has become a nightmare for this team, not just in terms of the on-field performance this season, but in terms of the mechanics of things here, that you're starting all over in terms of who's in charge of your baseball operations, who's in charge of your on-the-field product. There's also this too, and, you know, things rarely end in an amicable way. I think we all get that, right? In sports and in life, I don't know if there is such a thing as an amicable departing. I think we like to say that there is. I don't know that there truly is. And, you know, whatever you think about Mike Rizzo, I think it is more than fair to say that he, during his 2 decades with the Nats, had to manage up far more often than we'll ever know, right? Had to deal with an ownership group and the Lerner family that can be good, but that also can be quite peculiar. And to me, this was as telling as anything. Rizzo said the following to Barry's Verluga, columnist for the Washington Post, in a text on Sunday night, quote, "That's the job. I had a great run. Navigated that ownership group for almost 20 years, end quote." I mean, how about that? Navigated that ownership group, end quote. So, first of all, he doesn't even name the ownership. He calls it that ownership group. And he talks about having navigated that ownership group, essentially saying what so many have been saying for years, that, you know, he had to manage up as much as he had to manage down. I thought that was as telling as anything. Rizzo actually putting that out there for public consumption hours after being fired on Sunday evening.
Yeah, I think the key there is that, you know, he knew that was going to go out publicly when he's texting a reporter back with that line. I will say that the sentiment, I'm not surprised at all, having covered him for his entire time here. I heard plenty off the record about his dealings with a whole lot of things having to do with the organization, but first and foremost, ownership. And what I also can tell you honestly about that relationship is that there were plenty of good times as well between him and members of the Lerner family. This was not an antagonistic relationship the entire time over the course of 2 decades. They spent a lot of time together. Mike Rizzo, I think most people know, is a fiery personality, somebody who does not hold back his opinion a lot of times, and is not afraid to stand up for what he believes is right. And he would almost jokingly talk about the number of times that he threatened to quit over the years when he went to ownership, said, we need to do this, and they wouldn't let him do it. Now, obviously, he didn't. I think that's all part of what that relationship was for a long time between them. And I'm sure in the heat of the moment when it finally ends and the way that it ended so unceremoniously like this, he's going to let his guard down and let out that thought. I would be willing to bet that whenever that is, months from now, years from now, decade from now, who knows what it would be, Mike Rizzo and Mark Lerner and other members of the family are going to cross paths again, and they're going to hug each other, and they're going to smile and laugh, remember all the good things they did together. I've seen Rizzo have that same type of conversation with managers that he's fired over the years, other people who've worked for him that he let go, that he still is close with. I think it's who he is. I think it's his personality. I believe what he said in that text, and I know it to be true that he had to deal with this for all these years, and it was a huge source of frustration for him. But I actually think he does have a lot of respect for those people that he worked for, and is the type of person who believes that any kind of relationship, like in a family, you're going to have your highs and your lows, but you ultimately love each other, and you went through the wars together to win and ultimately to lose.
Hey, are you a law firm partner or associate looking to transition to a new firm because of compensation, or your firm recently committed to $100 million in pro bono work that you disagree with? Or maybe your firm is employing people like Jurix and Profar while your competitor firms are using torpedo bats and smoking the competition. If this sounds like you should explore the lateral market and give Mason Kalfas a call. Mason is the top legal recruiter in the Washington, D.C. area. He has been a Nats Chat podcast advertiser since the beginning of our show. Mason will work with you to create a marketing and business plan to pitch to new firms and dramatically increase your compensation and or day-to-day happiness in your new job. Mason has placed partners and associates in just about every large law firm in D.C. and New York, and he can provide plenty of testimonials from candidates he has placed on the outstanding service that they received. You need a strong advocate in your corner to find the best law firm out there for your future career. Call Mason Kalfas today, 202-486-3535.
Tim Shover's here to tell you about Babbel. Did you know that the Nats are on the Spanish radio airwaves for the second consecutive season?
Luis García Jr. por Lips con un batazo altísimo. Atrás era dinero. La bola se va, se va, se va. Se fue la fruta.
If you want to know what Luciano and Gustavo are saying on the broadcast on calls such as this one, then check out Babbel. And here's their special offer for Nats Chat listeners. 60% off subscriptions at babbel.com/NatsChat. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/NatsChat. That's spelled BABBEL.com/NatsChat. Babbel.com/NatsChat. Rules and restrictions may apply.
As the Nationals are a strike away from franchise history and some World Series history. As Hudson tries to close it out. It'll be another 3-2 pitch to Michael Brantley. Hudson sets. The kick in, here it comes. Swing and a miss! Swing and a miss! Swing and a miss! And a World Series Game 7 winning Curly W is in the books!
The greatest executive in Washington, D.C. sports history to me is Bobby Beathard. His work as Redskins general manager, he was the architect of the great Skins Super Bowl championship teams of the 1980s. His drafting is superb. To me, he's the GOAT of D.C. sports executives. I do think you can make the case that Mike Rizzo is number two. His run ended up being that good, even though it ended up ending in a poor way. But, you know, you think about what Rizzo took over. He took over a Nats baseball operations department that was in shambles off the Smiley Gonzalez scandal. And through his great work, especially when it came to trades, he got the Nats to where they, from 2012 through 2019, were a machine. 8 consecutive winning regular seasons, 5 playoff appearances, 4 National League East titles, and a World Series title. The problem, of course, is what has happened since that 2019 World Series title. The Nats have fallen off a cliff. They are in the midst of what is tracking toward being a 6th consecutive losing regular season. And beyond that, they're in the midst of this rebuild that, as we've been saying, or at least I've been saying, isn't working. And, you look at it and you look at how far things have fallen since the World Series championship. It wasn't like a gradual decline. It was a sudden and steep decline. And the Nats ever since have been trying to find their way back, and they just have been unable to do so. We talk about Rizzo's dealings with ownership. Two other things to me are absolutely true of his tenure with the Nats. He was awesome at trades. I don't know how anyone could ever dispute that. But as we have discussed, his work in MLB drafts was nowhere near good enough. And I think if you had to pinpoint anything that doomed his time here, it's the drafting. The drafting really has come back to haunt him. The drafting is what put the Nats in this predicament to begin with. And it is this predicament that ultimately spells the end of his time with the Nats.
And this is from someone whose background was in scouting and development and drafting. And I think that is the great yin and yang of Mike Rizzo as a GM. Hugely successful, as you just said, and deserves praise for the team that he built, the championship that he won, the trades that he made. You come up with a list of Mike Rizzo's 10 best trades and still find more that deserve to be on the list. And yet, the thing that in theory he was most supposed to be an expert at, and the best thing that he offered them, his talent evaluation of amateur players. We've gone through the numbers. We know not since Anthony Rendon, who was drafted in 2011, have they really drafted somebody who turned into a legitimate big-time big league player for them. Now, the jury's still out on Dylan Cruz, Brady House, who's now up, Kate Cavalli, some others in more recent years. It's too soon to say for certain about them. But as we've noted plenty of times on this podcast, going all the way back to July of 2022, the reason they tore the roster down and then ultimately traded a generational player in Juan Soto with 2.5 years left on his contract was because they had done such a poor job in building up a new farm system that could supplant the championship roster that had aged out, had moved on. And the only way in Mike Rizzo's mind to start that process up, to try to rebuild that farm system again, was to do the unthinkable and trade a future Hall of Famer, a trade that has worked out wonderfully, of course. You have to admit that. Now 3 of the 5 prospects are all-stars, 2 of them this year. But they hadn't done enough else beyond that. You've kept pointing out, and you've been accurate in this sentiment, besides that trade, what else has gone right for them in terms of their young players? Again, jury's still out on a few of them, but right now that trade is all he had to hang his hat on over these last few years. And there was a sense of, well, we got to give it more time. Let this rebuild kind of go all the way through. Let's see where it ultimately goes. It just didn't get there. I'm going to point out one other thing that I think is fair to be pretty critical of him on, and that's his free agent signings. Now, he's not dealing with the same budget the last several years as he did in the previous generation, of course. But even with a limited budget, the funding that he was given to spend, and especially this past winter, he did not spend it wisely at all. I just mentioned Shinosuke Ogasawara, $3.5 million. How's that working out? Trevor Williams, 2 years, $14 million. How'd that work out? Michael Soroka, 1 for 9. We'll see. It's been okay. Hasn't been great. Josh Bell, $6 million. Lucas Sims, Colin Poche, Jorge Lopez, everybody in that bullpen. I know he had minimal funds to work with, but he still didn't spend that money as well as he could have to put together a better team. And I think that really has to be part of the equation, because I think that, as much as anything, is the reason that they have the record they have this year. No, they were not equipped to contend this year, but they were equipped to be better than this, to be closer to 500, if not right around 500. And the whiffs that they had in free agency especially, I think are a huge reason for the record they have right now.
It was a really bad offseason. Of that, there is no doubt. Just with the bullpen alone, and of course, bullpen construction, a perpetual issue for Mike Rizzo. Another thing we've talked about over the years on this podcast. But if there was an Achilles heel for him, before the drafting really came to the fore in terms of being an issue, it was the bullpen. Even when the Nats were really good, Rizzo consistently had problems building bullpens. When it comes to Davey Martinez, I don't know. I don't think there's a lot to debate over, like, should he have been fired? Should he not have been fired? I almost view Davey as collateral damage from this standpoint. He was at the mercy of the players given to him by Mike Rizzo, and those players simply have not been good enough in recent years. So, there's part of me with Davey Martinez where it's like, well, we saw in 2019 what he was capable of with a team that was really good. And we saw over these last 5-6 seasons, what happens when he's not managing guys who are particularly good. He doesn't have very good records, but I don't know how many other managers would have done appreciably better than what Davey Martinez has done here. I don't think it's wrong to say that his time had come to an end. I don't think it's wrong to suggest that maybe this team just needed a different voice in terms of the manager. I don't think Davey Martinez is a bad manager. I do think he'll get another managing job in MLB. But it is fascinating to me. Davey Martinez goes down as by far the longest tenured manager for the Nats since the franchise moved to Washington, D.C. in the 04-05 offseason, but also as the manager with the second worst regular season winning percentage among Nats managers since the franchise came to D.C. His regular season record as Nats manager ends up being 500 and 622. Only Manny Acta had a worse regular season winning percentage among Nats managers since the franchise came to D.C. Now, I think we'll always remember Davey fondly for the great work he did in the 2019 postseason. As you know as well as anyone, Davey was masterful in terms of presiding over a clubhouse. As best as we can tell, not once did he ever lose the clubhouse over his time as Nats manager. But it just is so odd that he lasted for so long with a record that ended up being that poor.
Well, as we've discussed, you win a World Series ring, that buys you a lot of goodwill for a long time. And I think that applied to Mike Rizzo as well. I mean, we discussed before how unusual of a situation it was for a GM and a manager to win a championship, then preside over a teardown of the roster, but be given the opportunity to try to build it back up again and try to win again. And that's exactly what was given to them. And I think that only happens when you hoist the Commissioner's Trophy in October of 2019. You earn the right to now have some leeway and some time to try to do it all over again. And I agreed that I don't know that a different manager is going to make that much difference in terms of the one-loss record of this year's team. Here's what I will say, though, and I think this is 100% fair criticism. I think most people out there would agree with it. Consistent themes for Davey Martinez teams, both teams that were more talented and higher paid and now younger and lower paid. They always got off to a bad start. He never once had a good April, did not have a winning April. I think maybe they had a winning record initially in those first couple of years, but he was not where it was supposed to be. Obviously turned it around in 19, had a few times over the years where you said, boy, even though they're struggling, they're bouncing back, they're battling. And I think that was legit that they played hard for him, 100%. But what were some of the most common themes for these teams? And I think it really evident this year and especially over the last month plus. Defense. Poor defensive teams across the board. And even more than that, just a lack of improvement and even regression from some players defensively and in the field. Poor base running. Consistent theme here for quite a while. Didn't really see it getting better in a lot of ways. And then you saw, bullpen management, and a lot of that has to do with who he has to work with, et cetera. But obviously things didn't go as well there as you would hope. And so I don't think this was a team that Dusty Baker could have managed to a winning record right now. But I do think they should have a better record than they do. And all those quote unquote little things that Davey preached over and over through the years, they never really got better. And so I think it's fair to put that on the manager. I think there are plenty of other things that shouldn't fall to his feet, and to say that he got as much as he could out of a lot of these guys and got them to play hard for him all the time. But when you watch, especially these last few weeks, the sloppiness in the field and on the bases, the hitting approach of some guys, you do ultimately have to look at who's calling the shots and the coaches that work with him and say, could they have gotten more out of them? And I think, yes, they could have gotten more out of them. Could they have waited a while to make the move? Could they wait till the end of the season? Sure. I don't know that this is going to turn the whole season around for the Nationals. But I think the criticism of all those things, recurring themes of things that you would like to believe a manager and his coaching staff should have some control over, I think that's fair to bring that all up.
The ultra proactive announcement of last August that all of the coaches were being brought back, how's that working out? You know, like looking at that right now, how much of a home run call was that, as we say sarcastically right now? I mean, I don't think any of us understood it at the time, and that looks even worse now, almost a full year later. Hey, it's Al Galdi for Window Nation. The humidity is rather thick. You've got the AC running on blast, the fans on, and the shades closed, but the heat still seems to be seeping into your home. That is, until you replace your old, drafty windows with energy-efficient, top-quality windows from Window Nation. And right now, you can get 50% off all window styles plus 0 interest for 5 years. You heard that right. With Window Nation, you won't pay any interest until 2030. Call 866-90-NATION or visit windownation.com and tell Window Nation that you want the deal that you heard about from Al Galdi on the Nats Chat podcast. Also, know this, Window Nation will get the job done in a day or less. Window Nation's installation crews have over a decade of experience, so you can feel comfortable knowing that your windows are installed right the first time. Don't procrastinate another day. Save yourself another month of living in discomfort. Don't miss Window Nation's biggest deal of the year, 50% off all window styles now through July 31st. And remember, that comes with 0 interest until 2030. 866-90-NATION or windownation.com. That's 866-90-NATION or windownation.com. And tell Window Nation that you want the deal that you heard about from Al Galdi on the Nats Chat podcast.
I can say this. Often bumpy roads leads to beautiful places, and this is a beautiful place.
Ownership, the Lerner family. April 11th, 2022 was when we learned that the Lerner family had begun exploring selling the team. February 19th, 2024, President's Day 2024, was when we learned that the Lerner family was no longer exploring selling the team. A lot of us, myself included, have never believed that the Lerner family still isn't interested in selling the team. So maybe isn't actively shopping the team, but perhaps is passively shopping the team. I do think if the right offer came along tomorrow, the team would be sold. But the uncertainty with its ownership really starts to pop up in a circumstance like this. You need a new head of baseball operations and you need a new manager. If you are a bright, rising, smart, forward-thinking executive in MLB, why are you going to come work for the Nats right now, given their ownership situation? Unless you are given a truckload of money, unless you are given extreme assurances about budget, about payroll, etc., how are the Nats going to attract the best candidates for these jobs, given the uncertainty with this ownership group? That, to me, is a major concern if you're a Nats fan right now.
100%. And it's why really what this is all about. Yes, they made a decision to fire their GM, fire their manager, and there's going to be a domino effect of all of those. Probably after the season, they're going to go interim here the rest of the way with Mike DeBartolo, who has been the number 2 guy in the front office for quite a while, worked his way up from an intern in 2012. Really smart guy, very different from Mike Rizzo. He's soft-spoken, been behind the scenes, been much more involved in contracts and transactions and arbitration and those kinds of things. I'll be interested to see how he handles this role. I don't know if he is a serious candidate for the job full-time or not. We're going to wait and find out on Monday who the interim manager is. Somebody from within, I would guess either Miguel Cairo, the bench coach, who very close with Davey Martinez, or perhaps Matt LeCroy, the AAA manager, a good baseball man who's been with them in a lot of roles for a long time, very well liked. I don't know if he's, again, long-term managerial material. So really what this is all about now is, where are the Nationals going as an organization? And you're right. If I'm ultimately interviewing for either of those 2 jobs come October, I've got a lot of questions for the people who are interviewing me. What is your plan? What is your long-term vision? What's your short-term vision? How are we going to get to where we want to be? Do you intend to run this team like you did from 2012 to 2019? Or are you now operating the way that you have for the last 5-6 years, and that's the way it's going to stay? I think these are huge questions that have to be asked, and I hope that the learners have good answers for those. And I think they themselves, as they now spend the next few months figuring out where they're going to go, I hope they're doing soul searching themselves and saying, what have we done wrong? What can we do better? Because anytime you make moves like this, that's organizational failure. That's not on any one individual person. We've talked about this over the last month. Players are to blame for what's going on. The coaches, the manager, the GM, the front office, and ownership. Everybody has to take some responsibility when things go this way. And so if you're willing to make these major changes beneath you, are you willing to do anything different, make any changes in the way that you operate the organization? I think it's up to them to really present a vision of what their intentions are. I think everybody, since that day that they came out and said they were looking to sell the team, I think everybody's been waiting to hear, okay, what is the plan? How in are you on this? Are you out? How are you planning to try to turn this into a championship franchise again? And can we trust that you are the right group to make that happen? That, to me, supersedes everything else. And I think the next few months, it is on them to formulate a vision that they can then sell to whoever they ultimately want to hire for these jobs.
Yeah. Are you in or are you out on owning this team? And if you're in, then make it known that you are in and be in and spend on infrastructure and make this a truly appealing and attractive destination. Otherwise, this 1 foot in, 1 foot out, we don't talk publicly anymore approach of the last few years, it doesn't do anyone any good. And it's put the franchise in a really rough spot. I mean, to me, what should happen next is the Nats hire a smart, forward-thinking, analytically inclined head of baseball ops who goes all in on modernizing the team's baseball operations in terms of analytics and sports science, including beefing up staffing and spending on the necessary tools. And the Nats get going in this information arms race in MLB. That's what should be next. Do I expect that to happen? I don't know what to think, given the state of ownership. I would love for what I just outlined to be the case with the Nats. I think that absolutely should be the case with the Nats. But I don't know what to think, given the state of ownership. And that's a big problem. And like we were just saying, if you are a rising executive, why would you come here at this point, given these questions that we all have about ownership? So that is a huge part of all of this, for sure.
So something else that just kind of occurs to me with all this, you would think that if you're talking about first-time GM potential candidates, first-time managerial candidates, maybe that's where they go. We don't know. We'll see. That a lot of times those are more affordable options. Let's keep something in mind here. Mike Rizzo and Davey Martinez actually were two of the highest paid at their respective positions. Don't know exact numbers or figures, but Rizzo had multiple extensions over the years and was being paid as one of the top executives in baseball. And Davey, by virtue of being here now into his 8th season, was being paid, way more than a first-time manager, more than he got when he first got the job. So you had an ownership group that, in spite of the team's payroll on players, was spending more than the major league average on its GM and its manager. Do you go into this now and say, we're going to continue that? Or do you say, no, we're actually going to reduce that, get young up-and-comers who probably don't cost as much, and then where does that money go? Where are you now spending that money you just saved, to be honest, on your GM and your manager? I think that's a really interesting question to see how they go about doing that now.
Yeah, I sure hope cost is not a thing when it comes to who they hire to run their baseball ops, because I don't think there's a position on the ball club, player or executive, manager, coach, that matters more. You need the right person to do that. So whether it's a young up-and-comer, maybe it's someone who's on the youngest side, who's already working for another team, and you want to raid that team, like what the Mets did with David Stearns from Milwaukee a few years ago. This is the kind of thinking you need right now. The Nats, they can't miss with this hiring. This is huge. Who they hire to succeed Mike Rizzo. Now, we understand that hiring won't come until this coming offseason. That almost certainly is not going to happen in season. But this is massive, who ends up succeeding Mike Rizzo. I said that I think Davey Martinez will manage again in MLB. Do you think Mike Rizzo will run a baseball ops department in MLB again? Not whether he will be employed again. I'm sure he'll get hired by someone. But, beyond being like an advisor or something like that, do you think he will ever again be in charge of a major league team's baseball operations department?
I'm not 100% sure on either of them, to be honest. And here's why I'd say that, and just the harsh truth. Mike Rizzo is 64 years old. Davey Martinez is 60 years old. They're actually not that far apart in age. They've both been baseball lifers for a long time. They certainly have track records that you can go and say, hey, you've done this. You've won a championship before. We're going to hire you to take our team to that next step and do it as well. But they're also on the back ends of their careers at this point. And while I think both will have plenty of opportunity to work in the industry, no doubt, Davey Martinez has lots of friends in the industry, and whatever that might look like, a bench coaching role or potentially a managing role, I think he'll have more than just like one option. He'll get to maybe pick some different places that he could end up. But he's not a spring chicken. And is he the kind of guy that if you're a team, let's say you're a team that's where the Nationals were in 2018, want to get over that hump, you think you're good, you need to take that next step. Is Davey Martinez your hire for that job? I don't know necessarily if he's the guy for that. And if you're hiring a GM, Mike Rizzo, certainly you can look at the track record, but we've pointed out the flaws there as well. It's an old school line of thinking that's not as prevalent in baseball. There are some teams, I think of like the Phillies when they hired Dave Dombrowski, longtime successful baseball executive. He does it the old school way. It's worked out for them there with a big payroll, by the way. So maybe there is someone who looks at Mike Rizzo and says, yeah, I think he can be the one to help take us over the top and by doing it his way. But I wouldn't say it's a lock. I wouldn't necessarily say that's guaranteed. He's got friends in the business as well, yes. But his approach to doing things is kind of counter to how probably the majority of teams are operating these days. And doesn't mean that he can't still be successful doing it his way. But you have to find the right situation, the right ownership group that wants to do it his way, because I think, as we know, he's pretty hard-headed, and he says, this is my way of doing it. I believe in it. It's been successful before. I'm not about to take over a job and do this in a completely different way than I'm comfortable with. So I think it'll be interesting to see in both cases. I know neither one is ready to retire. I mean, they're full of life. They want to be doing this for a lot longer. And I'm sure they want to, bolster their legacies and not have this be the final paragraph of their baseball lives. But I don't think it's a guaranteed lock that they both get comparable positions again in the near future.
Yeah, it's tricky with Mike Rizzo, right? In an industry that is trending younger and more analytics, he's older and a scouting background. And it's just the antithesis of where the trend has been going for years, to say nothing of what we discussed with the drafting. Like if you're hiring a new head of baseball ops and you look at his recent draft track record, it's hard to sell yourself on saying, okay, this is the guy who's going to turn our franchise around. But we'll see. Look, Mike Rizzo did a lot of good things here. There's no doubt about that. Davey Martinez as well. In terms of the Nats of the now, so no game on Monday. You have two series, and then comes the All-Star break. Next up is a 3-game series at the St. Louis Cardinals. Game 1, Tuesday night, 7:45. Jake Irvin will be the Nats starting pitcher. Game 2, Wednesday night, 7:45. Mackenzie Gore will be the Nats starting pitcher. Game 3, Thursday night, 7:45. Michael Soroka will be the Nats starting pitcher. What is that Nats clubhouse going to be like come Tuesday when you're in there pregame talking to these players, and you'll be talking to the new manager, the interim manager, whoever that may be? That is going to be some scene come Tuesday afternoon.
It's going to be something unlike we've really seen in a long time. I mean, the last in-season managerial change they had was 2011 when Jim Riggleman walked out, coincidentally in the finale of a homestand. And then they had John McLaren, his bench coach, as the interim manager for 3 days in Chicago while they were hiring Davey Johnson, who took over the following series in Anaheim. Now, Davey Johnson, a very established presence, stepped in and was a calming influence on a team that was sort of similar to this in that they had good young talent and felt like they were ready to take the next step, but also had some big name veterans like Ryan Zimmerman and Jason Worth on that roster. So whoever it is stepping into a very different situation here. The thought would be that this is an interim job for the rest of the year. If it was a Matt LeCroy, and I'm still speculating here on that, whether it would be him, that is somebody that everybody in the room already knows. Pretty much everybody has played for him at some point coming up, including some of them very recently, maybe even within the last few weeks, played for him. He's a very different type of personality than Davey, but I think would command immediate respect. How that will go on the field, we'll have to see. As far as we know, the rest of Martinez's coaching staff is intact. And these are all of his guys we know that he brought in that are very close with him. How are they going to handle that situation? And we'll also talk to Mike DeBartolo on Tuesday and see what his vision is now as he navigates this and tries to make his own case for potentially getting the job on a full-time basis. It's really a situation unlike any we've encountered around here. And we'll see. I mean, what's so remarkable is we just spent all this time, 45 minutes, talking about GMs and managers. And ultimately, Davey Martinez was kind of right. It's about the players and the way that they perform over the remaining 72 games of this season is going to go a long way toward determining who the next manager is, who the next GM is, and how ownership treats this, and whether they believe this team can actually win with this group, essentially, that they already have, or whether they have to start all over again next winter.
First in-season managerial firing by the Nats since Manny Acta in July 2009. It had been a really long time since we had something like this, to say nothing, of course, of the GM being fired. Again, tell us what you think. Find us on X at Nats_chat. You can hit us up on Blue Sky at Nats Chat Podcast. You can email us, natschatpodcast@gmail.com. If you would like to sponsor the show, we'd love to have you on board. Contact the owner and executive producer of this podcast, Tim Shovers. Again, that email address is natschatpodcast@gmail.com. All Nationals radio highlights on Nats Chat, courtesy of 106.7 The Fan. For Mark Zuckerman, I'm Al Galdi. We thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on the Nats Chat Podcast.
Hudson has the sign out from Gomes. Colleagues set. Looks like they want to go in. Here's the kick now. The pitch, fastball is hit in the air to left center field. Robles calling for it. He's under and waiting, and he